Okay, guys, so let's define stress. According to the World Health Organization, this is their words, not mine, stress can be defined as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural human response that prompts us to address challenges and threats in our lives. I want you to think about all the implications surrounding that. I'm going to change one thing they said. It's a natural human response. It's a natural response for any living being to feel stress under certain circumstances. And it forces us to address situations and challenges. If there was no pressure, there would be no incentive. This is what you have to understand about stress. In this snowflake world we now live in, we get the luxury of believing that stress is all bad. But like anything, look, we evolved, human beings, I'm not even talking about animals yet, but we as humans evolved with stress for a reason. It is a biological imperative that you feel stress. It is conducive to your survival and to you thriving as an individual in this world. And it is the same for animals. We tend to think of stress as always caused by like external factors, like somebody was mean to you, you hurt yourself, something like this. But in reality, stress is everywhere. It is all the time in varying different degrees. Stress can be caused by anything from hunger to really wanting something, not being able to have it, to getting physically hurt, to going through mental and physical adversity, so on and so forth. There's a lot of different reasons why stress can exist. And the mistake a lot of people make is they assume, again, whether it's with humans or with dogs, that all stress is bad. I want you to think about stress from a holistic perspective, okay? And this is where you can really begin to understand what stress is and why it's important. If you want to go to the gym and become stronger and fitter, if you want better cardio, bigger muscles, what must you do to your body? You must progressively stress your body in order to improve your physical function. Your immune system, the thing you were born with, what must it go through in order to fully develop properly? It must go through exposure. It must become stressed by various viruses and bacteria, going through all of these different things. By being challenged, by going through adversity, your immune system becomes what? Stronger. Think about anything meaningful that you've accomplished in life, okay? Whether it's a degree, a high school education, learning a very specific skill, whether it's dancing, martial arts, carpentry, whatever. Was there not stress involved? Was there not times when it was very difficult and you had to persevere through that difficulty in order to reach that next level? I'm telling you, it's like that in dog training for sure. Stress is a critical ingredient to growth of any kind, mental growth and physical growth. I'm in my middle age right now. When I think about the things that used to stress me out when I was a teenager, it's funny. It's funny to me because since then I've been through so much worse. But at the time it felt like the world is ending. Think about a child. You say they can't have a cookie and their whole world falls apart. They scream, they cry, they lie on the ground. They have no ability to comprehend that this, in the grand scheme of things, is a tiny problem. They're literally in grief and mourning because they couldn't have that cookie. Because their level of resilience, their level of resistance to stress has not been developed yet. If I told you you couldn't have a cookie, you'd probably be like, all right, I can't have a cookie, kind of sucks, but I'm all right. I'll be fine. I'll get a cookie later. It's not the end of the world. It is the same for your dog. It is the same for training. We must introduce stress in a meaningful and productive way. Just as we do for our kids, just as you've done for yourself, I hope. People that have not had any kind of stress or adversity in their life, we tend to view them as fragile. We call them snowflakes. They fall apart at the smallest little thing. Everything triggers them. Everything's the end of the world for them because they've never really faced a lot of stress or adversity. So they have no ability to resist it, to function through it, to move past it. It is the same for your dog. If your dog lived on the streets and he had to go through all the adversity that he's gonna face in life, living on the streets as a wild dog, for sure he's gonna have a strong resilience to stress for that environment. But if you took your pet dog who lived in the house with you forever and you threw him on the street and you said, okay, good luck, buddy, he has not adapted to that environment. He has not, from puppyhood onwards, been prepared to be a wild dog on the streets. He's probably going to starve to death. He's going to fall apart. He's going to be in a state of terror and fear, most likely. Or he's going to do something that is going to get himself hurt or killed because he has not adapted to that environment. Stress is so important. It is a key component to growth. But not all stress is good. Some stress is bad. What is good versus bad stress? Let us talk about that. Good stress creates resilience, confidence, and growth. Bad stress creates suppression, fear without context, and a lack of growth, or it even moves the individual backwards, okay? When we're training dogs, we must introduce stress and expose the dog to stress, whether it's environmental, whether it's from handler input. We must expose them to stress in a way that allows them to be progressively more strong and successful. Just like if you go to the gym, if it's your first day in the gym, are you going and benching 350 pounds? No, you're gonna go and start benching like 40, 50 pounds. And you're gonna slowly, progressively build up your body's resilience to that stress. You're gonna stress your muscles, you're gonna make them grow, become stronger, bigger, so on and so forth, until you can get to that 300-pound bench press or whatever, level you can get to. It is the same with your dog. You're not going to go and maximally stress your dog all the time. That's not gonna create any kind of growth. You're going to incrementally apply stress through the training process, whether it's withholding a reward that the dog wants, whether it's creating light pressure that the dog has to work his way through in order to get the reward. The idea that you should train your dog without stress is asinine. It's irresponsible, just as it's irresponsible for me to raise my children without stress. We're very fortunate today. My children are growing up much better than I grew up. Not that I grew up in like a complete state of poverty or anything, but I surely didn't have even close to 1/20th of what my kids have. And I'm always thinking as a parent, it's too easy for them. It's too easy for them. I need to come up with ways to make them stronger, more confident, to teach them to handle adversity, to teach them to handle lack. While I'm very appreciative that they can grow up with so much more than I had, I also have to be cognizant that they are inoculated correctly to stress, that they're able to be productive through stress. But at the same time, I'm not gonna throw them out on the street or take them out into the woods before they're ready and leave them there and say, good luck, survive. They're too young. They haven't been prepared properly. Later on, when they're older, I will take them into the woods and leave them there. But that's going to be after a lot of progressive desensitization and growth to stress. It is the same in dog training. Bad stress. What is bad stress? It is stress applied without context. You're making pressure on the dog. He doesn't understand why there's pressure. Excellent example I always use is the stove, okay? We've all been burned by our stove. We've all been burned by pots and pans on the stove. We've touched the element. There's a lot of different ways you can burn yourself on the stove. Why aren't you afraid of your stove? You're not afraid of your stove because you understand the context by which you were burned. You understand why you were burned and you know how to avoid the burn in the future. So what does that create? What did that stress create in you? It created caution. It didn't keep you away from using the stove. You don't quiver in fear when you're touching your stove and working with your stove, even though being burned is extremely painful. You just are more careful and cautious. Some of us need to be burned a few more than others, but the fundamental principle remains the same. Think about it this way. If you went to your stove and you touched it, and just randomly you got burned one day for touching the knob, you got burned one day for touching the timer, you got burned one day when you opened the stove on the handle, you got burned one day for touching the element. Other days you would touch the element, you would touch the handle, you would touch the timer, and you wouldn't be burned. And the burns would just happen randomly. Would you want to be anywhere close to that stove? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't want to be anywhere close to that stove because there would be no context to that pressure, to that stress. You wouldn't understand why it was happening. And that lack of understanding, that lack of context would create what? Fear, insecurity. It would create suppression. I don't want to be anywhere close to that stove. I don't know how to avoid the pressure. I don't know how to avoid the stress. So stress is a necessary ingredient to growth. It is not the only ingredient to growth. I am not saying that. Today we are talking a lot about stress. There is also other things. Pleasure. Anything without context, anything without meaning is not good. We must have balance in all things, in dog training and in life. So it's really important that when you look at stress, you look at it objectively. You remove your emotions from the equation. You look at what you're doing with your dog and you say, is this productive? Is this non-productive? One more little thing on stress. I like using analogies because it really helps people, I think, understand. Most people, even if they're against using any kind of stress or pressure in dog training, have absolutely no problem taking their dog to the vet and forcing sharp pieces of metal into their dog's body in order to prevent them from maybe catching something one day. They have no problem taking their dog to the vet and having body parts cut off their dog that they deem to be negative from the standpoint of reproduction, or they believe that the dog having his testicles is going to create behavioral problems, so on and so forth. Not even an actual problem. People will get body parts cut off their dog and they'll force sharp pieces of metal into their dog to prevent them from having something maybe bad happen to them in the future. Do you not think that's stressful to your dog? I mean, it's stressful to me. And I'm not a dog. I understand when I go to the doctor why I'm getting an inoculation. Your dog does not. It is extremely stressful. It is extremely fearful. Dogs need to be sedated in many cases to go. But you're willing to do that for the greater good of your dog, for the greater good of your children. Think about taking your kids and getting their shots, especially when they're kids. You know how heartbreaking that is. Dog training, when done properly, isn't anywhere even close to that. And dog training is for sure important to the continued growth and survival of your dog, not just mentally and physically, but from a practical standpoint. If my dog is not guaranteed to come when he's cold, that's extremely dangerous. He could run into the road, he could get injured, he could get killed, he could get lost. If my dog is being aggressive and I can't stop him from being aggressive, he could get put down, he could hurt another dog, he could hurt another person, right? These are just examples. You can think of all the ways in which training fundamentally can save a dog's life. And not only save a dog's life, make the life of the dog and the owner better. My dogs get to be free. My dogs get to wander around off leash. They get to run in the woods. They get to be loose in public and busy places because we went through the appropriate stress to teach them how to be reliable, how to be obedient, how to be safe. So yes, was some elements of the training stressful? You better believe it was, but it was intelligent, well-applied stress to create the desired behaviors that allow that dog to have a high quality of life, to allow that dog to be safer and to be free. I shouldn't even have to explain this, but in this day and age, unfortunately, I have to explain this. And all these people that claim that you can get to the same place without stress are lying to you. The world is full of stress. Even if you're not applying stress, the world applies stress on your dog every day. Whether it's the stress of a competing motivator or the stress of something that makes your dog afraid. If you have not properly inoculated and prepared your dog to deal with that stress, and done so in a reasonable period of time, this isn't something that takes years. If you're doing it properly, it takes months at the most, then you are not being the best dog owner that you can be. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this lecture, I want you to think about this. This lecture is free, absolutely free on YouTube. Imagine what's available in my online courses. Imagine what's available in my Patreon. If you're interested, check that stuff out. Real unedited training footage, instructional step-by-step how-to videos. I hope to see you guys in there.